prayers, some introductory prayers. So page 34 of our prayer book. We'll offer the refuge and bodhicitta prayer 3 times in Tibetan and once in English, and then we'll continue with the other prayers on these 2 pages. Sangye chedan soki chonam la jancho paru dagni kyabsu chi dagi jinsogi pe sonam gi drola penche sangye dru par shok sangye chedan soki chonam la jancho paru dagni kyabsu chi dagi jinsogi pe sonam gi drola penche sangye dru par shok sangye Chedan soki chonam la jancho paru tagni kapsu chi dagi jinsogi pe sonam gi yola penche sangye ju parsho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. We'll offer mandala. So we visualize the entire world system and offer that to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, requesting both teaching and also all of their blessings. So we'll do this once in Tibetan and then in English. Sahipugi Joiking Mego Tramira Nide Gembadi Sange Shidu Mikte Ori Jorken Nama Shila Shipar This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamyayatayami. Now let's offer praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. It's 72, 73. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakti clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and then said, I am supreme in this world. To you, who are wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, form supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not, incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 ever devout homage. To all worthy of respect, bound with bodies as many as all realms, atoms, in all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the ways of aging, sickness, and death. Great, thank you. So welcome, everyone. This, as I mentioned earlier, this is our final course in our section on karma. And we were fortunate to have Venerable Gache came and offered class last week. A little bit, 12 minutes, independent origination. And so what today we're going to do is we're going to review a little bit everything we've done in the last couple of weeks. And then we're going to talk about purification processes, which we talked about already, but we'll do a little more in depth. And then we'll do a practice together. And that way you can have an experience of it and a chance to ask questions about it. And that way it's something when you do it on your own, you'll have some experience doing it together first. So that is the plan. Feel free to ask questions at any time if you like. So, and also hopefully this new timing works for people. During the monsoon season, we're going to try to go on Saturdays from 5 to 7, as you know, since you're here. And hopefully it works because we're trying to avoid the rains, which seem to come later in the evening. So if it doesn't work for you, you can let our SPC and other volunteers know. And we're trying to balance out the situation. But for right now, the next 2 months or so, this is the plan. So, the first question we really need to ask ourselves is, why do we need to study karma? Like, what's the point of studying karma, right? Like, of all the things that we can be studying, what is the utility in studying this thing, which we openly say it is known as a very hidden phenomena? To know all of the intricacies of karma and karmic cause and effect and what actual causes result in what actual experiences in people's lives, you have to be a Buddha, right? To know specifics like that. So what's the point of us studying it if we don't have that understanding, right? And we say there's two, I mean, really, if you look at the Lamrim, where does karma come when we study the Lamrim, in the stage of the Lamrim? The stage of Japan. I'm sorry?
Shared with the small scope.
It's shared with the small scope. So it's a practice shared with the small scope. But not only that, it's really the first practice of studying the path. So before we study this, we first study Guru devotion, then we study death and impermanence, perfect human rebirth, and so forth, right? But those are considered preliminary, even. So those are all practices that are in common with the small scope, right? But the real beginning of the practice is studying karma, because everything before that is working you up to studying karma, right? Studying perfect human rebirth is recognizing how fortunate we are to have the opportunity to study. Studying death and impermanence is motivating us to study, taking that perfect human rebirth and not wasting it, right? So those are pushing us towards the path. Studying karma, and then when we study karma, we also study what we mean by virtue and non-virtue. That is really the beginning of the practice, at least in terms of understanding the big picture, okay? So it is a practice that is shared in common with the small scope. So what does it mean to be shared in common with the small scope? So the small scope practices are practices that are aimed at having a positive rebirth, right? Medium scope practices are aimed at freeing oneself from samsara entirely. And then great scope practices are aimed at freeing all sentient beings from samsara by becoming a Buddha. So we need to always take that great scope motivation, that bodhicitta, that wish to become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings, and allow that to motivate all of our practices, even if they're small scope or medium scope. Which is why when we talk about it, we say practices that are in common with the small scope, because this isn't a uniquely small scope practice, right? It is a practice that is shared by small, medium, and great scope practitioners. So it's right at the beginning of our practice because it's fundamental. Yet we say karma is incredibly difficult to understand. And in fact, you know, if you look at the things that are purified, when you become an arhat, Hinayana arhat, so not a Buddha, but you reach the path of no more learning on the Shravaka vehicle or the Pratyeka Buddha vehicle, they still have a type of ignorance that is diluted with respect to karma and the law of cause and effect, right? Only Buddhas actually can understand this experience comes from this past action directly for any individual basis. Ledre la Mompa Maripa, that's called, right? So then why do we study it? What's the benefit? Especially for those of us now in the 21st century who are just trying to live our lives, right? Like, what is the benefit to studying karma? And there are two that I see, two real reasons we study, right? One is that karma, understanding karma, allows us to understand why we're experiencing what we're experiencing now, both those moments of joy and those moments of sorrow. We understand that they aren't causeless. They don't come from nowhere. We aren't being judged by some higher power. We aren't just at the whimsy of the universe, that there is some sort of cause that is resulting in our experiences, right? And that gives us a sense of purpose. It doesn't means we don't feel helpless, like we're just floating in an ocean with no control, right? So it gives us an ability to recognize, even if our circumstances are very difficult, right? And there are many external conditions that are outside of our control, that's true. But even with that, we realize that everything that's happening to us doesn't come from nowhere, and therefore we have the ability to do something about it. So it gives us a sense of control and a recognition that we don't have to just feel bad for ourselves all the time, right? Or for that matter, feel overly proud about ourselves either, right? We instead have to have a realistic understanding of reality, and that lets us develop a level of contentment that isn't rocked up and down depending on however great the tsunami of samsara may be. So that's one thing, is that karma lets us look at our current experience and understand where it came from. But then the other reason we study karma is we understand how to behave now so that we achieve the outcomes we want in the future, right? So on the one hand, what it's doing is it's allowing us to make sense of our circumstances so we don't feel overwhelmed by samsara, so we don't think we're being unfairly persecuted or prosecuted in any way. And that allows us to remain calm, to keep a mind of mindfulness and awareness, and allows us to react appropriately to our situation. And then it instructs us what we need to do to ensure that we have favorable conditions moving forward in future lives so we can continue to practice the Dharma. So it contextualizes our experience and it also then guides our actions. A proper understanding of karma does both of these things. Okay. So reviewing what we've discussed, we talked about karma, we talked about the law of cause and effect. It's a simple way to understand karma. And it's not necessarily the worldly cause and effect, right? But the understanding worldly cause and effect, like, I yelled at my boss, then I got fired. That's not karma. That's just you not understanding how to engage in appropriate workplace behavior, right? But that's a good example for understanding karma. So we can use worldly cause and effect like that as a microcosm of how karma works, because it is essentially the same thing, that every action has a subsequent reaction. And so when we create karmas, when we create these causes, they are planted like seeds into our continuum. But when they meet with the right conditions, then they ripen into experience. Okay. So many karmas we create aren't going to ripen in this lifetime. They can, but many of them won't. Many of them will ripen either in the next lifetime or in some future lifetime, unless we do something to stop them from ripening. And that goes for virtuous karma and non-virtuous karma. For pleasurable results or unpleasurable results, similar. They're going to ripen whether we want them to or not, unless we do something. So let's go over all the many kind of lists that we've gone through, and hopefully just remind ourselves a sense of karma, right? So first off, before we get there, karma, we said, right, is a type of mind, a type of mental factor. So everything we do is accompanied by karma. We have to remember that. We can't escape karma. All of our actions, the word karma, lay in Tibetan, or karma in Sanskrit, action means action, like a deed, right? And so every single thing we do, every action of body, speech, and mind is accompanied by a karma. And then that karma may be very weak. It may not have a lot of substance to it, depending on the actions. But every action we do is accompanied by karma. And in big part, that is because as ordinary sentient beings, everything we do has a subtle motivation of self-grasping, of grasping a true existence, right? And so even if we aren't aware of that, that's not explicit, but we have this implicit grasping at true existence that serves as what we call simultaneous motivation with everything we do. And so last week, I'm sure Venerable Gashi mentioned the first of the 12 links, right, is the Maripa, is ignorance, right? So ignorance is that grasping at true existence that is omnipresent in all of our actions since we're ordinary sentient beings. And so that it means we always have some sort of karma being created. And that karma, as we mentioned, transforms pretty quickly into an imprint, right? If karma is a type of mind, it's really the imprint that plants itself into our continuum in some way. We often use the word karma and imprint indistinguishably, but they are a little bit different. It's not just us, though. Even in some of the texts, you see the same thing. And then at some point, a lot of the texts will just say, I say karma, but I really mean this. And then they keep going, So we have to remember that we can't escape karma. And not believing in karma, unfortunately, doesn't mean it's not going to affect us. It'd be a lot easier. If I didn't believe it didn't happen, that'd be really nice. But it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Okay. So starting off, we say the first important thing to know about karma is that there are 4 general principles of karma, right? What are these 4?
Definitive.
That is definitive. So what's that mean? Karma is definite. That's a different one.
Virtue will lead to happiness.
Yeah. So by definite, we mean that a negative action is going to have an unfavorable result. Positive action is going to have a favorable result. So it's definite in that way. When you plant an apple seed, you're only going to get an apple tree. Impossible to get an orange tree or a mango tree from an apple seed, right? That's what I mean by definite. So by definite, we mean that positive actions are going to create positive seeds that will ripen into favorable results. Negative actions are going to create negative seeds or imprints that will ripen into unfavorable results. And of course, we know, and we'll talk about it later, that there is mixed karma. So one action might have a little bit of positive and a little bit of negative, but there's still a definite capacity to it. So that's the first one. It's definite. And then what is number 2? The second general principle of karma?
It expands, it's dynamic.
It expands, it increases. I think the term we used from these texts are that it's dynamic, right? So karma is definite, karma is dynamic. So it increases, right? So even the small actions we do will have outsized results unless we do something to stop that karma from increasing. And that goes for virtuous karma and non-virtuous karma both, right? So that is important to remember for both negative and virtuous karma, because for negative karma, it means that even engaging in some small action can have disastrous results that we don't think of. you know, so we have to always be aware that even what I think this is not a big deal. This is just a small, just a little non-virtuous. It's not a big one. That mindset is missing the fact that karma expands, right? But then on the flip side, with our virtuous actions, we might think, what's the point of me, you know, making an offering because I can only offer 50 rupees. It doesn't matter. It's such a small offering. There's not going to be any effect of doing this small good deed. That virtuous karma is also going to increase, right? And also it doesn't have anything to do with the quantity you actually give. That not maybe a great example, but you know what I mean? That if I think this is a small good deed, it's not very important. So therefore, what's the point of doing it? That's misunderstanding that small good deed, when it's nurtured, is also going to grow. So karma is dynamic, or it increases, it expands. It's second.
So everything expands. The good, the small expands, and the big also expands.
Yeah, everything expands. Yeah. Even the very heavy negative karma will only continue to get heavier and heavier and heavier unless you do something to stop it for both positive and negative. The way we think of it, and again, using our examples, is that you think of an acorn that grows into a tree, right? Or a seed, any seed, a mango seed, a papaya, or even look at papaya seeds, they're this small, right? But it grows into a full papaya tree. So a very small seed will result in something very large. And it's the same way, or it has the capacity to. It doesn't have to, right? But it has the capacity to. So then
it's not this in physics, they say every action has equal and opposite reaction. So of course, opposite no, but not even equal.
No, this is neither equal nor opposite. Well, it's at least equal. I mean, how are we measuring equal, right? Like it's a little bit difficult to say what we mean by equal in this math equation. But no, so we're not karma isn't concerned with worldly physics.
No, but it's opposite because we're all harming others and get the suffering that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how we're dealing with this idea of yeah. So I wouldn't equal and opposite reaction, I think, is not the right way to think about it. Correct, because it seems contradictory to that. I'm sure you could sweet talk your way into making that physics equation work with karma, but it's not. I don't know. It's not particularly useful for me. I think my instinct is to say it's the opposite of it. So then, in addition to being definite and dynamic, what's the third characteristic? And this is what was mentioned earlier. It's specific, right? And so what do we mean by specific? Is that your actions you're going to experience the results of your actions, not someone else. And someone else's actions, they have to experience themselves. So karma is specific insofar as whoever created that karma is going to experience it. Now we can create karma in groups, right? We can create karma. So for instance, if I tell you to go kill a goat for dinner, both of us are going to receive the negative karma of killing, even though I don't do the physical act. But by me telling you and then you going and doing it, we both receive the karma. But those are two separate karmas. It's not like I receive your karma and you receive my karma. We both receive the karma of killing, right? Because me telling you to do it and you doing it is equivalent to doing it myself. So that one act of killing results in karma for two different individuals, okay? But that's still, we both created that karma. It's not like one karma that was spread out. It was we both created it. So karma is specific. And you can't experience the result of a karma you did not create. That's the important part to remember. So whenever we experience anything in our lives, whether it be beneficial or harmful, whether it be favorable or unfavorable conditions, we remember that I created the causes for this to happen. I may not remember creating them, may have been many lifetimes ago, but I still created them, right? And that's useful when we're experiencing unfavorable conditions, that it helps ground us, but also when we're experiencing very favorable conditions, it's useful to remember that, like, you know, if everything seems to be going right, then we can celebrate. I did something right in the past to get me to this point, but then that motivates us to not waste it, right? That then makes our practice more fervent because you say, look, this is obviously, it's working out. So I gotta, you know, ride this momentum. Okay. And then the last one, we have definite, dynamic, specific, and
not extinguished.
Dormant is what we said. Yeah, dormant is the weird. When I was preparing for Magache to come teach, I mentioned these are the terms I was using, and he called me and said, "What is dormant?" He's like, "How dormant doesn't make any sense." And I was like, "I know, but that is the term that's in the texts, and in case they refer to FPMT materials, that's why I'm using it." And he's like, "But how do you explain it?" And I was like, "I just explained the meaning, and then I used the word dormant." And he's like, "Okay." So dormant is a strange term, I agree. But the idea is that we don't necessarily experience a karmic result immediately, right? And it's not going to go away. And I think the reason they use the term dormant is to give, it's easy to think that I created this action, if I don't experience a result immediately, then it must have just gone away on its own. And so this is showing you that that's not true, that it's just kind of hiding out, that it's lying dormant, waiting for the right moment, waiting for the right conditions to cause it to ripen. Because the karma is dependent upon having the right conditions, right? Which is why the analogy of seeds is really useful, because if you just go throw seeds in the ground, they're not going to grow into anything. You first have to dig up the ground, you have to prepare it, you have to get out all the weeds, right? And then you throw seeds on it, and then you still have to water it, give it sunlight, give it fertilizer. So it has to have the right conditions for that seed to sprout into something. So it is a useful analogy. So these are the 4 characteristics. And these are really important to remember because they help us control our behavior. They help us give context to our experience. And then the next thing, we have so many lists. Karma is full of lists. Well, not just karma, all the Dharma is full of lists. You just get used to memorizing them. The next one is the 4 different types of karmic result that can come from any one karmic action, right? So what are the 4 types of karmic result that we talked about? So first off, we can divide it into 2, right? We can say that there is karma dividing in terms of its result. There is propelling karma, also known as throwing karma or maturing karma, or ripening karma. And then there is completing karma. So we can divide it into those 2, first off. So what do we mean by throwing karma or propelling or ripening or maturing karma? What do we mean by that?
It's responsible for a rebirth.
Right. So that is a type of karma, the heaviest, strongest type of karma that is propelling us into a future rebirth. So that is kind of karma that says you're going to be reborn as a human or as a god, a demigod, an animal, and so forth, right? So that is what I mean by propelling karma. And then completing karma, we divide into 3, right? We have the karma that is similar to cause and experience, similar to cause and habit, and then environmental results, right? So when we say similar to cause and experience, it's exactly, if you are harming someone, you experience harm or sickness or short lifespan. If you are harming someone, the similar to cause and habit is it becomes easier. You have the habit, the instinct to continually harm others, right? Which is the most insidious of all these results because it creates a negative feedback loop. And then environmental, the completing karma of environmental results is literally the environment you are born into or that you somehow find yourself in, you know? What we are going to do once we finish going through all these is I'll go through one action and explain all, like, what are the potential results and for one specific action. So we'll kind of do a little more detail.
Venerable, can you repeat this? The first one is experience similar to the
So it's similar to the cause in experience, then similar to the cause in habit is the third one.
or tendency.
Or tendency, yeah. Behavior, they say sometimes. So there are 2 that are similar to the cause. One is in experience, one is in tendency or habit or behavior. And then there's the environmental. And then we talked about the fact that not all karma is equal, right? So karma can be heavier or lighter. And there are a number of different factors that can determine how heavy or how light a specific karmic action is. So the first one of those is that karma can be, and this is specifically talking about negative karma right now, is heavier by nature, right? So if we look at the 10 non-virtuous actions, killing is heavier than stealing, which is heavier than sexual misconduct. And lying is heavier than divisive speech, which is heavier than harsh speech, which is heavier than idle gossip. And having wrong views, such as believing that karma doesn't exist, is heavier than having harmful intention, which is heavier than having covetousness. So the very nature of the misdeed makes it heavier or lighter. So that's one mediating factor. That's the first one, heavy by nature. The next one is, so they give, generally, there are 6 of these that are taught, negative karma. The next one is that it can be heavy by intention. So how strong your intention is when engaging in any sort of action, the stronger your intention and the more complete your intention is, that is going to make the karma heavier as a result, okay? So nature, So it is heavy by nature, heavy by intention. The third one is heavy by the means or the deed performed, right? So when you're killing someone, as you do, this is the one they always use as an example. But when you're killing someone, you can think there are ways to kill someone that is simple and quick and ways that are very violent and drawn out and more painful, right? Those aren't going to be the same karmas. So the deed itself, if it's done in a way that is more forceful and causes more disturbance to the other being, to the object, whatever it may be, or whoever it may be, is going to be a heavier karma. So the deed itself. So nature, first, they're heavy by nature. Second, heavy by intention. Third, heavy by the deed itself or the means. 4 is heavy in dependence on the basis or the object. So this is who you are engaging in this negative karma in relationship to, right? And so, for instance, killing, it's a much heavier negative karma to kill one of your parents than it is to kill a stranger. Okay? Or they say it's much heavier negative karma to kill a larger animal than it is to kill a small animal. And at least Pabon Rinpoche's reasoning is that the larger the animal is, the more they experience physical suffering and pain. I don't know about the reality of that, but that is like one of the beliefs, because the very act is causing more pain to them. So to kill an elephant is a heavier karma than to kill an ant, they say. I don't know. I just do my best not to kill any of them.
So,
It's
but
easier.
then killing an
But
elephant is worse than killing a human, because an elephant is.
well, so then we first say killing a human is the heaviest of all the different types of sentient being, or killing any being that has a capacity to practice Dharma is the heaviest. So the closer you are to Buddhahood, the heavier it is, first off, right? So humans are, as we say, having a perfect human rebirth is the ideal opportunity to practice Dharma. So that's the heaviest kind of karma in terms of killing in general. But then even within humans, there's different. So killing one of your parents, killing your mother or a father, or killing an arhat, right? We say is a negative action of immediate retribution, right? That you immediately go to a hell realm in your next life after you pass away in this life. That's how heavy it is. Whereas killing another human being that you may not know but isn't related to you would be lesser. Again, we don't really want to do any of these negative actions, but it's important to know that they are just, there's different levels of weight to them, right? This is just trying so we get our minds around the full concept of karma, okay? We're going to learn it. We want to learn all the details about it. And then as we do that, we see which ones are more useful in my life. So me knowing that killing this kind of animal versus that isn't necessarily the most useful in my everyday experience or practice of karma, but it is important for us to know because we want to have a big picture understanding. Okay. You find out a lot of the stuff you study is you're filling in small details that for your everyday life may not matter. But when that doubt comes up, having that detail explained makes you more confident in the things that are important to your everyday life, right? So having these kind of things, at least some sort of explanation for them, it seems superfluous and it may not affect your everyday practice. That's true. But it is important because it gives you a big picture, right? That you're not reliant on someone else to give you an answer. You have an understanding of the whole thing, right?
So what did you call it? Heavy by target?
That one is by basis, is what they usually say, or object, basis or object. In the same way, stealing from a monk or a nun, or stealing from one of the 3 jewels is heavier than stealing from someone else, for instance. Which is why if you buy an offering for a puja, and then you decide you don't want to give it anymore and you want to keep it for yourself, that's actually considered stealing from the 3 jewels. So if you are coming, I know we have a Lama Chopa scheduled sometime soon. If you go and you buy offerings for it, and then all of a sudden you're getting hungry and you're like, well, I can just eat some of these biscuits now. It's okay. I bought extra. Don't do that. Set them aside. Okay. So it's not just for killing. We're using killing as the example, but it's true for all of it. It's also true for positive karma, right? We'll get there. But so making an offering to a Buddha is more powerful than making an offering to a non-Buddha in that instance, right? Because the object it's heavy by the object. Then the 5th one is frequency. So the more you engage in an action, the deeper that habit becomes, then that increases the karma itself, right? So the karma just becomes more powerful due to the fact that you do it over and over again. And then the last one they talk about is that it is the lack of an antidote applied immediately. So we'll talk about antidotes when we get to the idea of purification. But if you engage in a really harmful action and right away you realize that you did and you develop regret and you do something to counteract it right away, then even if it's a really heavy action, right away that karma is made less heavy or lighter because you've applied an antidote in a very quick way. The most important part of that antidote being generating mind of regret, right? In that case. So not applying an antidote readily is the sixth factor that can make a specific action heavier or lighter. So those again are heavy by nature, heavy by intention, heavy by the deed itself or the means of performing the deed, heavy by the basis or the object, heavy by frequency, and then heavy by not readily or quickly applying an antidote. And those same go for virtuous actions, not just non-virtuous, but there's one more added to virtuous actions, and that they're heavy by, heavy by holding vows. So if you have vows not to do something, then so when you take the layperson's vows, right, and you have the vows of a layperson, so the vow not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, not to commit sexual misconduct, and not to consume intoxicants, and then you engage in the act of non-killing intentionally, that is a more powerful virtuous karma than someone who doesn't have that vow, right?
And reverse, right? You make a negative karma when you're holding vows, it multiplies.
Well, it's that the flip side of vows is that they are like a multiplier for both directions. So when I vow not to kill, my act of non-killing becomes more virtuous, but then my act of killing becomes more non-virtuous because not only have I engaged in the act of killing, but I've broken a vow at the same time, right? So it becomes heavier in both directions, both for virtue and for non-virtue, which is why they say, being fully ordained, a fully ordained monk has 253 vows, and a fully ordained nun has a little over 300 vows. So they say that the amount of merit that you can achieve as an ordained person is like an ocean compared to the drops that a lay person can ordain. However, the same goes for non-virtue if you're not careful. So just having the vows, it's a double-edged sword, which isn't to say don't take vows, but it's just to be aware that how powerful vows are. And so for lay people, it's not just the vows of individual liberation, the pratimoksha vows. Those are your 5 vows as a lay person, but it's also the bodhicitta vows or the bodhisattva vows, right? Which is the 18 root vows and the 46 branch vows. And then there's tantric vows for those who continue to practice tantra, right? So we often have teachings on the 3 types of vows. That's what we mean: pratimoksha vows, bodhisattva vows, and tantric vows. Those are the 3 types of vows you can take. And all of them combine to make your actions more powerful.
How many of each of them?
Of what?
Pratimoksha, how many?
So pratimoksha vows, as a layperson, you'll have 5, right? There are 8 divisions of pratimoksha vows. But so there's pratimoksha vows for a householder, for a novice, for an intermediate, for a fully ordained monk, and the 1-day pratimoksha vows. So there's those divisions. But as a layperson, there are 5 pratimoksha vows. For a novice, monk, or nun, there's 36. For a fully ordained monk or nun, fully ordained monk is 253. Fully ordained nun has like 318 or something like this. I don't actually remember how many a fully ordained nun has. A little more. And then that's all pratimoksha. And then bodhisattva vows, there's 18 root vows and 46 branch vows or commitments. And then with tantric vows, you have vows and you have commitments. You have vows and samaya, it's called, right? And so there's I think there's about 19 or 20 vows, depending on which lineage you follow. And then the samaya, you have the samaya of the 5 Buddha families. And there are 18, right? Samaya, right? I think there's 18. I may be incorrect now. And even with tantric vows, you have the primary tantric vows, then you have the secondary tantric vows. So it depends on how elaborate you're going to go. So we can talk about those another time. But it's just the point is recognizing that every layer of vows acts as a multiplier to make your actions heavier, one way or the other.
So the nuns have more vows.
Yeah.
So many more. Monks have 23.
253.
200.
Yeah. So it is more, not that many, but it is more. When the original vows for the monastic communities came about, they weren't just all written and then given out. They happened, they occurred organically. So when something happened, then the Buddha made a vow to prevent that from happening in the future. And obviously the nuns had more obstacles, right? And so many of the vows for the nuns, aren't about their behavior themselves, but it's about protecting them. So for instance, nuns aren't allowed, a fully ordained nun isn't allowed to go out after sunset by herself. And that's because nuns were being assaulted on the road. And so that is actually for her protection, that she has a vow not to do that. So it has nothing to do with her behavior, but the environment they found themselves in made it more dangerous for them, right? So some of the nuns' vows are like that, in that way.
Right, the self-explanatory, they sort of intuitively true, and we can also test them. There are a few things though, like for example, the fact that karma has ever increasing. This is a little bit difficult to test.
Yeah.
So how do we convince ourselves? No.
That's a good question. So, unfortunately, there isn't a way to test, right? This increasing factor of karma. So the only way we can convince ourselves of it is by looking at the different aspects of the teachings that we can validate with our own experience, and then looking at the teachings and develop confidence in the teachings themselves to see that these things the teachings say are in line with my experience and in my meditation and my practice. And therefore, I have confidence that what they say in these other aspects also bear some truth. And we have confidence in the teaching, in the actual word of the Buddha, where he gave teachings on these regards. Unfortunately, they're not verifiable in some of them, you know. So they do require some element of having faith or confidence, but it shouldn't start out from zero. It comes from your own experience and the other things that you can verify, you know. And then also for me, especially when I was first entering into my practice and my study, I took almost like an agnostic attitude of what does it harm me to believe this? Like, is me believing this, is this create an obstacle to my practice or to my path or to my lifestyle or my understanding, right? And if it did, then I'd do more research. And okay, this is going to be something that I feel is deleterious to my life. Then why do I feel that? Is that valid, or is that my self-grasping or self-cherishing mind? And then I look more into it. But if it's not, then I take an agnostic approach to it, using all the other experience I have until I can find more confidence in it. But that's a good question. Because, you know, the Buddha said, don't believe what I said just because you have faith in me. Believe it, test it, like you would test gold, right? By burning, rubbing, or cutting. So in the same way, we should test these things. And unfortunately, karma, the fact that it increases is hard. Like I talked about, Pabonka says, if you kill a louse and you don't do anything to purify it, after 18 days, the weight of killing, the karmic weight of killing that louse is the same as killing a human being. I have no clue where that mathematics comes from, right? Like, and to be honest, I don't know if this is like inappropriate to say, but I don't care. Like that mathematics isn't that important to me, right? Like the idea behind
it. That's what.
Yeah, but still, like what?
Bacteria, man.
But so then you are like 18 times exponentially more powerful, more important than a louse. Like I don't understand like how that math. I understand the concept.
18 doubles. Keep doubling.
No, I understand that, but the point is that still, why not 17 days? Like what happened? The point is like that sum of karma, quote unquote, whatever it is, it doesn't matter to me, you know. And maybe I'm an iconoclast by saying that, but my point is that I believe in the principle of it, and I believe that those specifics aren't as important as the principle, right? And the principle I believe in because I have confidence in the teacher that it came from, due to my own verifiable experience of the other teachings in that same category that we're taught about, right? So it goes like that a little bit. It's a good question though. Okay, so we've talked about why we study karma, what are the 4 general characteristics of karma, and what are the 4 types of karmic result. Now let's talk quickly, and I mentioned briefly the 10 non-virtuous actions. These are always taught in the context of karma, so we'll mention them again just very quickly. The 3 non-actions of speech, the 3 non-virtuous actions of body, the 4 of speech, and the 3 of mind, right? And so the 3 non-virtuous actions of body are killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and they are heavier by nature in that order. The heaviest is first, the lightest is last, though the lightest is still pretty heavy. And of course, sexual misconduct means something different depending on who you are. So as a full ordained, as a monk or nun, any sexual activity at all is sexual misconduct. For a lay person, it's a different definition, right? And there are a couple different categories of it, depending on who you're studying and what teacher and what time period they came from. They qualify it differently. But having sex with an inappropriate person, so like someone you're related to, is one type of sexual misconduct. Or having sex committing sexual assault, obviously, is sexual misconduct. Or having sex outside of a marriage or outside of a committed relationship is considered sexual misconduct. Or having sex in an inappropriate place, like they say in front of your guru, and I just am like, okay. Good to know, don't do that. But also like not at a monastery or not, you know what I mean? So they're inappropriate places as well. So these all qualify as sexual misconduct for a layperson, right? So basically, the way it's generally understood by contemporary teachers is any sexual activity that is in a loving, committed relationship or that is mutually, what's the word I'm thinking of? That is by mutually consenting adults is generally considered to be not going to be sexual misconduct, assuming it isn't in the wrong place and or in front of your teacher.
But if it's adultery,
Adultery is always sexual misconduct.
even if the adultery is with some consenting adult who is also.
So then this is the question, right? So now we have this idea of polyamory and people that are in thruples or in non-binary relationships. So there's nothing in teaching to talk about thruples, okay? So this is my belief is that if you are in a loving, committed relationship with two other people, so there's three of you, then that is not going to be sexual misconduct. Or if you're in a relationship with a partner, but it is a loving and open relationship where it is accepted on both sides that you can engage in sexual activity with others outside of that, and everyone has the same level of agreement and belief, and there's no deception, there's no lie, there's no harm in any implicit way, then I don't think that is sexual misconduct. However, sexual misconduct, of all of the actions, we say, it's impossible to engage in sexual activity without being motivated by desire, right? So it's always, there is Geshe Namdak, who many of you know, who was one of the original teachers here, now teaches in London. He always loves to kind of point this out to people. As a monk, it's very easy for him that any sexual activity is going to have some negative karma because it's always going to be motivated by desire. And it's impossible to engage in sexual activity, even in a loving, happy relationship that isn't motivated by desire. So that's not sexual misconduct, right? But it still is never going to be a virtuous karma in that way. He likes to point that out. So I'm just saying he likes to point that out. But that's still not sexual misconduct, though. So I think we have to recognize that in loving relationships where there's no lying, there's no deceit, there's no harm, then that is not sexual misconduct. Okay?
So don't you think that certain parts of like what you're saying is sort of influenced by the times then? And
I think it's definitely influenced by my culture and my understanding of how we exist in the world. Yes.
right, but then but karma remains the same through the ages. So how do we
Because
sort of
I understand. I think that the way we understand karma is through our human experience, right? So the karma remains the same, but the way I can explain it is going to involve different language, different ideas, right? So do I believe that 2,000 years ago, if you were in a married relationship that had sex outside of it and everyone was agreeing, I think it would be the same amount of karma then as it would be now, except that now there are circumstances where that's socially acceptable and acceptable within a relationship. And in ancient India, it's very unlikely that would have ever been acceptable, right? There always would have been some harm being caused as a result due to social expectations. You would necessarily be transgressing a social norm, and therefore it wouldn't have that same level of acceptability, right? So you would be causing harm to your partner by having a sexual relationship outside of your marriage, or most likely, right? So how we interact with others, right? How we engage in loving relationships with others and how we harm others is dependent on what is expected as part of society. To some extent, not 100%, but to some extent, there is malleability, I think.
The harm caused by it would be different in different social circumstances and different centuries. The harm is just not just doing something, but how it affects other people and the family and the partner.
This is, it's an important question. I think that if we remember that we are doing our best and trying not to ever cause harm, then you're probably on the right path, right? So if you are looking at any activity you do, whether it be engaging in sexual activity or any activity and saying, by engaging in this activity, am I causing harm implicitly or explicitly to someone else? Or is there potential for harm? And if the answer is yes, then it's worth reevaluating that activity, right? So that is the most important thing. And then, so moving on to go through the non-virtues. I'm not quite sure how long our meditation is going to take today, so I want to get to it because it might be a little longer. So I want to get through this first. It's more important. What are the four of speech? Lying is first. Divisive speech. And that is, Pamonka points out that divisive speech it doesn't just mean divisive speech aimed at people that are in relationship, but even enemies. Like if you have two enemies and you engage in more divisive speech to cause them to have more enmity toward each other, that still counts as divisive speech. So it's not like just breaking up a friendship group, but it's creating any sort of division or widening a division, right? So lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, so speech that causes offense, right? And it doesn't mean necessarily vulgar speech, but speech that is intended to harm in the way you express it, right? So they can also be compliments that are said sarcastically or said the wrong, you know what I mean? Not everything you say, it may sound nice, but it may be dripping with poison, right? And then everyone's favorite,
Gossip.
idle speech or gossip, right? So idle speech or gossip. It's a hard one. It's very, very hard. But it's important to remember that it is always creating negative karma, right? That doesn't mean you have to only be talking about Dharma all the time with your friends or with your family or whoever. But when you're engaging in something, when you're engaging in conversation about something, why are you engaging in that conversation? And so maybe you're talking about the latest TV show you watched with a friend. That's great. What's the purpose of that conversation? How can you engaging in the art, whether it be a TV show or whatever, then be part of your own spiritual practice, right? And even if it's not a Buddhist that you're talking with, how can you speak about something in such a way that isn't just wasting time, that isn't wasting your perfect human rebirth? So that's the important thing, trying to find that balance. But it's a hard one. Gossip, it's nice that it's the fourth, that it's the lightest of the four, let's just say. It's very fortunate for us. At least for me. I won't speak for you. Very fortunate for me. Monks love to gossip. Gossip. I was going to tell a story, but it probably would be better not to, so I won't. And then the three of mind. Covetousness, right? Then malice or harmful intention, and wrong views, right? So the important thing to know about wrong views is that wrong view is not self-grasping, which self-grasping is non-virtuous, or it is harmful. It's not always non-virtuous though, right? Self-grasping can be neutral as well, depending on many other factors. But not wrong views are views such as the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are not authentic sources of refuge, or karma, the law of karma doesn't exist. That's what we mean by wrong view. So actually holding one of those views and holding tight to it. So those are the 10 non-virtues, and then the 10 virtuous actions are the opposite of those. Now, it's not to say that those are the only 10 non-virtuous things, right? There's lots of other non-virtuous activity, but they all find their root in those 10. But those are the main 10. And by calling those the 10 non-virtues, it means they're always non-virtuous. That's the important part about understanding the 10 non-virtues, is that those actions are always non-virtuous, right? Whereas other things, such as self-grasping, for instance, it can be neutral. It can't be virtuous, but it can be neutral. And so we look at all of the afflicted minds. When you study mind and mental factors, you understand that there are 6 primary mental factors of affliction, and then 22 secondary afflictions. That's at least according to the most common division we study. There are other divisions that create more. There's some that create up to like 70, but we do this one. Those don't have to be non-virtuous. They can be neutral, right? Just because they're an afflicted mind doesn't mean you're creating non-virtue as a result of it. But these 10 are always non-virtuous, which just shows that they're heavier than the others, right? It's more important to keep them in mind, which is why it's still a bummer that gossip is on that list.
Venerable.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so there's always my father was in the army, so this in a war situation, you're killing a human being, an enemy, but that's part of patriotic fervor, right? As an army man, so how heavy is that karma?
It's still
So
pretty heavy. It's still pretty heavy. And actually,
okay.
Imagine it's even heavier for the general who's ordering the men to go kill, right? Because every single person killed is on the weight of that general, or on the prime minister, or whoever it is that's governing the army. Every single death is on them. But unfortunately, being told to do something and then following order, you're still accumulating negative karma. And that's what we were saying earlier, is that unfortunately, whether you believe in karma or not doesn't exclude you from the results of it. And so there's a difference between having like a moral understanding of something being morally acceptable and then creating positive or negative karma. Like they don't always line up 100%. You know what I mean? Like it may be morally acceptable to engage in a certain activity, such as engaging in warfare, which I don't really think is morally acceptable, but some may consider it morally acceptable. But that doesn't preclude you from creating negative karma. So unfortunately, there's no virtuous way to be a soldier, which is very difficult in the world right now, where you need standing armies, right? It makes it very hard to understand, like leading a Buddhist country that doesn't have a standing army. Then what do? How do you engage in those behaviors? So it's very difficult. It's very difficult. Sometimes, they say that when the Dalai Lama fled from fled from Tibet into India in 1959, there were monks that traveled ahead of him with rifles to make sure that there was no one on the road to stop him, right? And most likely they were willing to cause harm in order to protect Dalai Lama, which would have been non-virtuous. It would not have been virtuous, but they believed that what they were doing was more important. And that's the same as someone who's in the army, right? And someone who has some sort of patriotic fervor. They believe that the harm they cause isn't as, or rather they believe that even if that harm they cause results in them accumulating intense amounts of negative karma, they're willing to do that because they think the benefit outweighs it, right? That's a very hard calculus to make. It's a very hard calculus to make. Right? But it's also a willingness to accept that negative karma and saying, I understand that engaging in this harmful activity is only going to create negative karma for myself. So I'm willing to do it. And yet I still am willing to do it because I believe that there's a more virtuous reason to it. Like having a virtuous motivation doesn't negate the harm, right? Because that brings us into what are the next aspect we want to remind ourselves of, or what are the 4 aspects of a complete karmic activity that we talked about, right? Yeah. And this goes into having different motivation, but still engaging in the action. So what are the four aspects of a complete karmic activity? So intention is second. What's number 1? Basis, right? The basis or the object, same thing, right? Basis or the object. And then intention. And the intention has 3 parts, right? So recognition, motive, and then the delusion that's motivating it. Okay. And then, so basis, intention, then the act itself, the deed itself, the action, and then
Completion.
The completion of the act, right? And so you have to be complete in all of those ways to have the full weight of a negative or a positive or negative karma. So if you don't have the intention to do something, but you still go through with it, it won't be as heavy. Or if you have a virtuous intention, right? But you still engage in a non-virtuous activity, such as killing, but you only have a virtuous reason for it, it's still killing. It's still going to accumulate negative karma, but it wouldn't be as heavy if it was done out of a non-virtuous or out of a different motivation. So let's talk very briefly about, let's take one action. So if we look at the 10 non-virtues, right? So we'll look at killing because that's the easiest one to talk about because it's the most extreme. Let's first look at what those 4 aspects are in terms of killing, okay? So now these are going to be different not for killing. Killing's the same no matter what. Some of them are different depending on what vows you hold because it's a little bit different for monks' vows or for ordained vows and lay vows, but not for killing. Not for, most of these is the same. There'll be some differences. That's okay. So killing, what is the object or the basis to the act of killing? In order to be a complete karmic act, what does it have to be?
Sentient being.
Close.
Or human in terms of the non-virtuous.
No. You're close to a sentient being. What's more? Yeah, a living being. So what is the difference between a living being and a sentient being?
Sentient being doesn't include Buddha.
Exactly. Right. So
but you can't kill the Buddha. You
can kill a Buddha's body. You can kill the aspect. You can. You can't kill a Buddha's mind. But if you were to kill a living Buddha, and they showed the aspect of dying, it would be the equivalent karma, even if, there was only a performance for them. So killing, the object has to be a living being. So you can't kill a non-living being. It's pretty simple and easy to understand. It's more important to understand, for instance, like for stealing, it has to be something you don't own, right? So if you believe that this is yours and you take it, but it isn't yours, then the basis is still something you don't own. Sorry, that gets into the intention. You have to be aware, that it's not yours, right? In order for it to considered a full karmic act. But you can't kill a non-living being, but any living being is the basis. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting a little nervous about the time, so I'm rushing. I apologize. So, okay, the basis is any living being other than yourself. That's important. Any living being other than yourself. You can't actually kill yourself and have a complete karmic act of killing.
The
It'd be
suicide doesn't count.
It won't be complete, right? And that for the first object and the last object, the last reason, right? We'll get there in a second. So what's the second? The intention. So the intention, we have three parts. So what would be the recognition? It'd be recognizing that the object is what you think it is, right? So recognizing that this is another human being I'm going to kill. This is an insect. This is an ant. This is a, recognizing that it is a living being. Not if you thought you were kicking a statue, but it was a living being, you wouldn't have proper recognition because you thought it was a non-living being, but instead it was a living being, right? And then the motive is wanting it to die, wanting to actually engage in the act of killing. So if you don't have that wish, then it's not a complete act. So when you step on an insect going down the street, it's not there. Or even if you're engaging in a harmful action, you don't want to kill them, you just want to hurt them, but then they die, it still is the negative karma of killing, but it won't be complete because you didn't have the motive to kill them. You only had the motive to harm them, right? So it wouldn't be fully complete, it'd be partial. And then recognition, motive, and then delusion, any of the three root delusions, right? Ignorance, hatred, or attachment. Some of them have to be motivated. Some of the non-virtuous actions have to be motivated by one particular delusion to be complete, but but killing can be any of the three. So you can kill out of anger or out of attachment or out of this delusion, ignorance. So then the deed itself is engaging in the act of killing, and either by any means possible or telling someone to kill on your behalf also counts as killing. You don't have to be physically present to engage in it, right? And then lastly, the completion means they have to die before you do, which is again why killing yourself wouldn't be a complete karmic act, because it's impossible to fulfill that last aspect. So it's easy with the act of killing to go through them. You can go through all of the 10, and if you are looking to have it broken down, Pabonga Rinpoche goes through it very clearly in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hands, which is a common text. He goes through all 10 non-virtuous, all 10 non-virtuous deeds, and explains these details for all of them. We won't do it here, but it's to show that sticking with killing, what are then the 4 types of karmic results that can come from a single act of killing? So we have the 4 types of karmic result: propelling karma, and then we have completing karma. Completing karma then are 3, right? Similar to cause and experience, similar to cause and habit or behavior or tendency, and then environmental. So what would be the propelling karma that would come from the act of killing? So a birth in one of the lower realms, right? It could be any one of the 3 lower realms, depending on how heavy the action would be, okay? So what would be the environmental result, the result that is similar to the cause and experience?
Someone else killing you.
Someone's killing you, someone causes harm to you, you are sick all the time, right? You have a weak body. These are all can be consequences of engaging in harmful actions toward others, right? And then similar to cause in habit or tendency, you have the instinct to always want to hurt others, and it becomes easier and easier for you, right? And then lastly, environmental situations. It can be that you're in a war-torn area or a difficult environment. Also, that things such as medicine don't have a lot of effect on your body. That's also considered an environmental result. That what would be beneficial to other people and would help ease them of their physical distress isn't going to be any benefit to you, right? That's also considered the result of the environmental ripening of a karmic act.
So climate change is an environmental.
I mean, climate change is a very worldly cause and effect, right? Like climate change we are doing to ourselves right now. We could say that there is some sort of probably collective karma that we are experiencing the results of climate change. But I think, at least in my experience right now, it's more useful to think about the fact that like we are actively causing climate change. It's like more like our grandchildren's generation, they have the collective karma to experience the negative results because they didn't do it. They're just stuck with it. Whereas we're actively doing it. Do you know what I mean? So, but it is still a karmic result. But if it's something we can we have the ability to actively change it right now. So I don't like to, again, what's the most important thing I mentioned about, I didn't mention today, but in general, what's my most important thing talking about karma?
So we know we have control.
That's right.
And
That's
we can
right.
understand why things are happening.
That's right. But karma is not what? Karma is not supposed to make us diffident, passive, apathetic, right? Karma isn't an excuse to let bad things happen. Karma doesn't say like we can look the other way when bad things happen because it's their karma. Therefore, they deserve it, right? Karma isn't blame. Karma doesn't say, I see a poor person, I'm not going to help them because they have the karma to be poor. Even though I have the karma to be wealthy and the karma that I could actually actively help them right now in this life, I don't have to because it's their karma to be poor. That's not what karma is. Yes, it is true that they're experiencing poverty right now due to whatever actions they've created in the past that result in that. But they've also have the karma to be in a circumstance where they're in proximity to someone who could help them, right? So karma doesn't give us an excuse to be passive or to be apathetic or to be indifferent to the plight of others suffering in the world. So we can look at climate change, for instance, and say that our experience of the negative consequences of climate change are some type of collective karma that globally the 8 trillion human beings and all of the other sentient beings on Earth are experiencing. That's true. But we also have the ability to do something about it. I mean, not a lot of ability right now, depending on which country you live in and what your government does, but we have some ability as a collective, right? Like as human beings, as a collective, we have some ability, right? So understanding something to be the result of karma doesn't give us an excuse to then allow suffering to go without any sort of action against it, if we have some sort of capacity to do something, right?
Without formal purification, what if we talked about killing karma, right? What if in the process doing it like a veterinarian having to euthanize animals? It's complete in every respect. You're intending when you're doing it, but also you regret it. And you don't really, you're not getting joy in it. Is that a mitigating factor?
It's still going to be the negative action of killing, but it won't be as heavy, right? It'll be lighter, especially if your real goal is that you see this. For instance, if you're a vet that's engaging in euthanasia, you see this being that's suffering greatly and you don't want them to experience that suffering anymore. And therefore you are offering them a way to have a painless death that is going to put them out of their suffering in this life. That's your motivation, and you try to develop a mind of really strong compassion, right? Then it's still a negative karma, but it won't be as heavy. Yeah, it's still negative. And I mean, this is one of the hardest things that, at least in the West, I imagine it's similar here, is that we consider the euthanasia of animals as like we're never advised to do it, not just because it's the act of killing, but because, as we talked about, sometimes karma can extend beyond your one lifetime. And so we say that if an animal is experiencing the negative karma that is causing them to be having physical pain at the end of their life, and you engage in euthanasia, then you end their life before that karma has finished ripening, then it still has to ripen more in a future life. And it could ripen even worse in a future life than ripening. At least at this time, they have an environment where there are people that care for them and they have some sort of, hopefully, painkiller or some loving environment that is helping them along, right? So the environment that karma is ripening now, while it is unpleasant, isn't necessarily as bad as it can be. But if you engage in the act of euthanasia, you don't know if that karma has finished ripening or not, and it may have to continue ripening in a future rebirth. So we're advised to never engage in euthanasia, which is really, really hard when you have an animal that's suffering, right? It's really, really hard.
People are very prone to it. I mean, many people, they think that it's okay for animals. Human beings, they have a different idea altogether. Funny.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people that are talking, nowadays in the 21st century, there's a much bigger movement about what does it mean to, do we have the right to end our own life, and what does that look like? And are you legally allowed to help someone, to assist in someone's ending their own life, and to do it compassionately? And there's not everyone agrees with it. But from a karmic point of view, it would always be killing. If I were to help you end your own life, right? Even if I had the best of intentions, it wouldn't be as heavy, but it would still be killing. So as a Buddhist, we do not encourage it. Put it mildly.
So euthanasia for myself would also be, would not be, would be an act of killing.
Yeah, so
and it would be, I suppose, suicide.
So if you engage in suicide, even if it's at the end of your life because you're in a lot of pain, then it wouldn't be a complete act of killing, like we mentioned, because it wouldn't be complete in all aspects, especially the last aspect of the other person has to die before you in order to be a complete act. But if you then enlisted someone to help you, it would be a complete act of killing for them, right? So you would then be taking your act, the negative karma you've created, and multiplying it by having other people also create that negative karma by asking them to assist you if they did, If you ask someone else to procure the poison you took or whatever it may be, then they are complicit in your actions. So you have essentially created the causes for them to then create negative karma. They still have to do it on their own, but you created the conditions where they then did that.
So in Switzerland, where they have euthanasia clinics and stuff, those according to the teachings are.
So this is where, yes. So according to the teachings, the karma created in those is negative, or there's negative karma created in those actions, right? My personal beliefs when it comes to things like this is that I fully believe that that is creating negative karma, the karma of killing a human. I also believe it is not my place to tell you what to do with your life, right? And I believe that we can live in a society where decisions like that can be made by competent adults in their right mind. And that just because I believe this is a negative karma, that I don't have any authority to tell you, you shouldn't do that, right? So that, I mean, that's my personal belief. Like I'm not in charge of you or the world or the country. And therefore, I don't think any religious belief system should be telling people what should be governing the laws of the country, that you need to have some ability to make your own decisions, right? So even if I believe that action is going to create negative karma, it's not my place to say, it's my place to tell you if you ask, yes, that's creating negative karma. And as a Buddhist monk, I would never advise you to do it, right? And if I advised you to, I would actually no longer be a monk, right? If I engage in the act of killing, which includes telling someone to engage in the act of killing, and they do, that's one of the root vows of a monk or nun. I'd no longer be a monk, and I couldn't fix that vow. If you break a root vow as a monk or nun, that root vow is broken for the rest of this life. It can't be repaired, right? So killing, sexual misconduct, killing a human being, sexual misconduct, stealing anything of value, or lying about your spiritual attainments. Those are the 4 root vows for a monk or nun. If you break them, you're no longer a monk or nun. Even if I wear the robes, no one may know but me, but that's how heavy it is, right? For a monk or nun. And so I would never advise someone to, but I also wouldn't stop you, like legally saying, right? So when you're dealing with, have any of you, this is my love of pop culture and spirituality, have any of you read The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin? So Ursula K. Le Guin, famous speculative fiction writer, The Dispossessed is 1974 masterpiece, sci-fi masterpiece. And there's a planet of anarchists, basically. And one of the people from this planet, so anarchism as is a real political movement, right? It's like it's a type of socialism, often called libertarian socialism. So think of socialism, but then get rid of any sort of centralized authority at all. That's what you have with anarchism. And so one of these anarchists is on another world that's essentially like a capitalist, like a US type environment. And someone criticizes him and says, you obviously don't have any morals because you don't have any rules. So your whole country, your whole planet has to be immoral because you have no rules. And he said, it's the exact opposite. We are seeking out our higher morality. We don't have any moralizing. So we don't have rules or regulations or punishments, but it's only through the lack of coercion when humans can actually see good and evil and make the choice to engage in good behavior that you can have a true type of morality. Anything that is coerced from the outside won't be a pure morality, right? And now I'm not saying I agree with that 100% as a Buddhist, but that idea is important, that I can't force something on you to have you anything I force you to do that's not coming from your own intention isn't going to be complete, right? Especially with virtue. So I can't, coerced morality isn't the same thing as real morality in this regard, right? And so I think it goes for the same thing with a euthanasia clinic, and like this. Okay. I was going to go over the 12 links, but I'm not going to because I want to do meditation. If you have questions about 12 links, hopefully there'll be time at the end of class so you can ask them. So very quickly, the idea of purification. This is, again, one of these things, as you were asking earlier, how can I have faith that karma actually multiplies, right? How can I have faith that karma actually is purified? So there are some signs. They say if you do karmic purification a lot and you do it well, often you'll have signs in dreams. One of them is dreams of like vomiting a lot. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't sound great, but okay. I mean, if that's what it takes. But so you can have an experience of feeling lighter. You actually have an experience of not carrying a burden anymore. And this can be in your everyday life and also in your dreams. So there are some signs, they say, that can come if you do a lot of purification regularly. But in general, you have to have some confidence in the teachings and trust in the teachings themselves, because it doesn't always operate on a level that we can experience in a ready fashion without some sort of meditative insight, right? So when we talked about purification, there are 4 components that we talked about. Purification using what we are called the 4 opponent powers. And so I've talked about these before. I'm going to go through them again quickly, and then we'll have time to do a practice. And a practice is probably going to be quicker than I would like to, but that's okay. So what are the 4 opponent powers? I know I've talked about them before. Reliance is the first one. Here, I'll just mention them and then we'll talk about what they mean. First is called reliance, and then regret, then remedy, and then resolve. That's the way that's the names that you see in the FPMT materials. They're like the 4 R's. I think it's easy to remember that way. Reliance, regret, remedy, resolve. So what do we mean by reliance? This is actually called the power of the basis, right? If you were to look at many texts, they wouldn't be called reliance, it'd be called the power of the basis. So when you engage in a harmful action, you engage in a harmful action toward either a sentient being or a Buddha, right? And so we say you need to then rely upon them to reverse that harmful action. And the example they gave is if you fall down, you have to push off the floor to get back up again, right? So you have to rely upon that thing against which you committed an infraction in order to reverse that infraction. So reliance, the opponent power of reliance, or the basis, it is generating a mind of refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha. That is the reliance on the Buddha. And then generating a mind of bodhicitta, the wish to become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. And that is looking at those 2 objects, sentient beings and Buddhas, who are the 2 objects you could possibly harm, right? So that's how we have reliance. We rely upon the things against which we created this negative karma. That's reliance. Then regret. So regret is the most important of the 4. You know, if you have a strong mind of regret, then the other ones come naturally, they say. And now the thing with regret is, in order to have a really strong mind of regret, you have to have confidence in the law of cause and effect. Because if you don't believe in cause and effect, then why would you ever regret your negative actions? Never mind the negative actions from past lives, but even the negative actions in this life, there'd be no reason to regret them if you don't have a confident belief in the law of karma, right? So that's how it's important to study karma in order to develop a mind of regret. And that the more powerful your mind of regret is, the more powerful your purification process is going to be. This also then involves having confidence in past and future rebirths, and believing that I engage in the negative actions in the past, even if I don't remember them, and therefore generating regret, not just for the immediate negative actions that you do that you remember in this life, but also for negative actions you've done in the past, even if you don't have any memory of them, right? So developing a mind of regret is the most important. It's the most important of the 4 factors. And the strength of your mind of regret is going to be one of the most important determining factors in the strength of your practice. And now, an important thing to remember with regret, also when we're talking about ideas of embarrassment or shame in Buddhism, which are all considered, embarrassment and shame are considered virtuous mental factors. Regret is changeable. Regret is changeable because if you regret engaging in a positive action, that's actually a non-virtuous mind, right? And if you regret engaging in a harmful action, then it becomes virtuous. But with all of those, regret, shame, and embarrassment, none of those are the same as guilt. None of those are saying, I'm a bad person because I did a negative action, right? So that's how I understand guilt to be, is guilt isn't looking at the act, but it's looking at me as a person and saying, because I engage in this non-virtue, I'm a bad person. That belief is guilt. That's not useful, right? That isn't useful or helpful at all. Regret is recognizing that the action itself was harmful, it created non-virtue, and therefore generated the wish not to engage in it again. But it's looking at the action itself, not the person who did the action. As soon as you start focusing on the person and you apply a judgment of the person as good or bad, then that is developing a sense of guilt, which isn't useful, especially when you're looking at yourself. So that's reliance and regret, then remedy. So remedy, generally, any virtuous action done intentionally will be a remedy. Okay, you can do any virtuous action and it'd be considered a remedy, right? There are generally 6 remedies that are taught, or 6 types of remedy. But then whenever they teach them, they say, but any virtuous action counts as a remedy. But these are the 6 that we are usually taught. Okay, so a remedy would be in response to reciting the names of the Buddha, right? So there's another practice we're not going to do today. And the 2 most common purification practices in our lineage are the Vajrasattva practice that we're going to do today, or a version of it we're going to do today, and then what's called the Sutra of the 3 Heaps, which is also known as the Confessional Sutra, which is prostration to the 35 medicine Buddhas. So if you hear the Sutra of the 3 Heaps and you hear the 35 confession Buddhas, those are the same thing, just different names for the same thing. And that practice is actually in this book as well. But that is the 3 heaps are the heaps of prostration, confessing, and rejoicing. That's why it's called the Sutra of 3 heaps. And reciting that sutra includes all 4 opponent powers. So it's very powerful. So that's the first type of remedy, generally that's taught, is with regard to the names of the Buddhas, the Tathagatas. And then any sort of mantra recitation or any action done as a mantra recitation is a type of remedy. Any sort of sutra recitation is a common remedy. So reciting the names of the Buddhas, reciting any mantra, reciting any sutra, meditating on emptiness is a remedy. Engaging in any act of offering, making offerings, is a remedy. And then anything that is related to the display of the body of a Buddha. So making satsas or painting statues or painting tantas or creating anything like that with regard to the image of a Buddha is another one of the remedy, right? So those 6 are the most common that are taught that it can engage in a remedy. So reciting either the names of the Buddhas or any mantra or any sutra, or meditating on emptiness, making offerings, or creating images of the Buddha or statues of the Buddha. Those are the 6 that are taught as most common. But again, any virtuous activity done with intention. And then lastly is the resolve. So the resolve is important. It's like tying the bow on top of the package, right? So the resolve is not only recognizing we engage in a harmful action, generating regret, then engaging in some sort of remedial action, but then promising not to do it again. That's an important part. It seals the deal, essentially. And now the way we're taught is that you have to be forthright about your resolve. So, for instance, if you notice that you engage in the act of gossip and you generate a mind of regret and you engage in a remedial action, to say, I'm never going to engage in gossip again is really hard, right? So then you say, I promise I'm not going to engage in this for as long as possible, at least a day. Especially if you're doing Vajrasattva every day, which we should be doing some sort of purification practice every evening. Then sometimes take things one day at a time. You say, okay, all those acts of killing, I'm never going to do those again. I can generate a strong mind that's really convinced I'm not going to do those again. Those acts of lying, a week, not going to lie. You know what I mean? So it sounds silly, but you don't want to make resolve, then break it, right? So make a resolve that is pushing you and is also realistic, right? So the heavier things, make the resolve for as long as possible, but also be realistic as much as you can. So, yeah, so those are the 4 opponent powers. So any act of purification needs all 4. And now it's also important to know that if you do perfect purification every day, but you don't do any work to get rid of your self-cherishing mind or your self-grasping mind, it's useless, right? Like you have to do the work. You have to have the intention not to create negative karma in the first place. Like that's the most important thing, is that you're actively working to stop creating negative karma. And the way you do that is by having understanding of how karma works, but also actively working to get rid of your self-cherishing mind, not let your self-cherishing mind motivate your actions. So your actions cease to be worldly activities, but instead are spiritual activities. And to do your best by meditating on emptiness to get rid of the self-grasping, the mind that says that things exist as they appear, and therefore my reactions that are based in that ignorance are valid. Right? If you're not doing any work to do that, then sure, purification practices are beneficial, but it's missing the point. It's going and closing the barn doors after the horses have already run out. Okay, so with that, we're going to do a Vajrasattva meditation today. This is the most common, one of the 2 most common practices, but especially for the ones that are done every day, that are advised, this is the most common one done every day in our lineage or our tradition. So we're going to do a short Vajrasattva meditation. So Vajrasattva is considered like a primordial Buddha. We don't have any images of Vajrasattva here, but this is really wonderful practice. This is a short Vajrasattva practice that you can download a PDF of, and we can share it. It's shared in the Zoom chat, but also you can contact us. It's available for free online. I'm going to recite all the parts of it today, so you don't have to. But then on your own, you would recite these yourselves. The only thing that I want you to recite today is the actual mantra itself. And that is on page 64 of the Gold Book. So don't worry about any of the rest. The mantra, when we get to it, we'll recite that together. Okay?
This is on the FPMT website.
This is on the FPMT website. It's called a short Vajrasattva meditation. If you just search for Vajrasattva, you'd find it. So page 64 is where you have this mantra. So we don't need to worry about it right now. We'll get to it. I'll tell you when we get to it. And we're going to recite that. We'll recite it slowly. It's slow when you start. When you do it every day, it gets a lot faster. It's called the 100-syllable mantra for a reason, because it has 100 syllables. So it's a mouthful. Okay. And the way it's written right now in this book is the proper pronunciation, the Sanskrit pronunciation. You'll never hear a Tibetan pronounce it this way, ever. Okay. Just because they pronounce Sanskrit as if it were Tibetan. So you'll see it in other books written different ways. And even if I recite it now, the way I learned it is a mixture of Tibetan and Sanskrit. So I might stumble over it. So we're going to do our best together. But so if you see it somewhere else and it has some weird things in there, that's just because it was probably written in accordance to the Tibetan pronunciation. Okay. So we'll get to that. I
Just want to make sure that they have the file.
yeah, it's there. So just some things to know about this before we start is that there are different ways to do this. Okay. There are different ways to do this practice. We are going to do a method that comes from Yoga Tantra. Now, even if you haven't received Tantric initiation, it's okay to do this practice. At least that's what we've been taught by our teachers. If you received the highest Yoga Tantra initiation, there's another way to do this where you actually visualize yourself as Vajrasattva. So we're not going to do that today, but that is another version of this practice where you visualize yourself as the Buddha. What we're doing today is we're going to visualize the Buddha above us, right? Above the crown of our head. And so this version of the meditation comes from, like I said, Yoga Tantra. So of the 4 types of Tantra, there's Action Tantra, Performance Tantra, Yoga Tantra, and Highest Yoga Tantra. This type of meditation comes from Yoga Tantra. It is and you do not have to take tantric vows to even receive a Yoga Tantra initiation. Right? So it's acceptable for us to do this, even for those who haven't received any sort of initiation. Okay. What else to say? So when we get to the purification part and the recitation of the mantra, there's different visualizations that can go with this. So the visualization is actually part of the recitation. So I'm going to read it out loud, but when you do it yourself, you'd read this out loud. So you don't, the visualization is like literally right on the page in front of you. So you don't have to remember it. It's already there, which is nice. But so to give you an overview, you're going to be visualizing Vajrasattva, mother and father. So it is Vajrasattva with consort, and they are going to be above your head. They're both white in color. If you have this, you'll see a picture of them. Basically, they look like any tantric Buddha with the full crown and everything. Very similar to, we don't have an image here. Anyway.
Which direction are they facing?
Yes, so they're facing the same as you. So they're going to be on top of your head, just floating. They'll be small in size, maybe about, you visualize them. You can visualize them as big as you want, but generally you visualize them about the size of a hand width, more or less. They'll be at the crown of your head, okay? Just floating right above the crown of your head, facing the same direction as you. And what we're going to be visualizing, as it's explained, is at their center is a moon disk. That's just a white circle with the syllable hum in the center of it. And then circling that syllable hum would be all the syllables of this 100-syllable mantra. And as you recite that mantra, from that syllable hum at their heart, there comes a brilliant white light that descends through their body like nectar or elixir. And as it exits their body, it fills your body. And there are 3 different visualizations that we're going to do to go with this. One is called the cleansing from above. One is cleansing or purifying from above. One is purifying from below. And one is instantaneous purification. And so we're going to do all 3. So we're going to do 21 recitations of the mantra. We'll do a group of 7, and those will be purification from above. 7 will be purification from below, and 7 will be instantaneous purification. So I'll let you know when that happens. But so purification from above is you picture this white nectar coming from Vajrasattva, father and mother, and entering into the crown of your head, filling your body from the top down. And as it does, you visualize all of your negative actions done in this life and all past lives that you've generated regret for, in the form of like a black smoke or like a black tarry liquid. And that gets pushed out the bottom of your body as the white nectar comes from the top, right? So that's what it means to say purifying from above, is that the purifying nectar comes from Vajrasattva, fills you from the top down, and all of the visualization of your negative deeds expel out the bottom of your body. Then visualization from below is the exact opposite. So it still comes from above you, because that's where you're visualizing the Buddha. But as that white light or that white elixir hits your body, you fill up from the bottom up. And then the black visualization of black smoke or black tarry liquid exits out the top of your body and dissipates into space, into nothingness as it exits out the top of your body. Okay, that's purification from below. Then instantaneous purification is you visualize all of your negative deeds in the form of a black light that is clustered at your center. And then as this white elixir enters into your body, it's like turning on a light switch that it just eliminates instantaneously all those negative actions, the visualization of them. And you're filled from the inside out with this white light, okay? So those are the 3 types of visualization that we're going to do. There are other versions of visualizations you can do, such as you're doing these, you develop the mind that, at least for the first 7, I'm visualizing all my negative actions of body, and then the next 7, all my negative actions of speech, and then all my negative actions of mind. You can also do more elaborate visualizations where you can visualize that white light going to certain parts of your body for different reasons. So we're not going to worry about that today. The Dalai Lama says if you're doing like extensive practice, like 2 hours or more, then you can start with this visualization, and then you can actually engage in like different types of meditation. So like you'd focus on meditating on emptiness while reciting the mantra. So you'd supplement the visualization of Vajrasattva with other long room meditations if you're doing really long, extensive sessions. So we're not going to do that today. But just so you know, there's different ways to do this. So if you look at other texts that give instruction in this practice, there might be different visualizations. They're all valid, right? So this is just the most common one. So let's go ahead and adopt a comfortable position. And because I have spoken a lot longer than I planned, I'm going to go through the beginning steps of this somewhat quickly because we want to do 21 recitations of the mantra. I'm not quite sure how long that will take, so I'm not sure how fast I have to go. But when you're doing this on your own, right, especially if you commit to doing this every day, then A, the mantra recitation is going to get quicker. You're just going to get more adept at reciting these syllables. And B, it's useful to spend more time on the other sections, really making sure the visualization is strong, and most importantly, really making sure that mind of regret is strong. Those are going to be the most important parts that you might want to spend the most time on, or a little more dedicated time. Today, we're going to go through it quickly. So let's adopt a comfortable seat, a comfortable position. And if you know the posture of Vairocana, you can go ahead and the most common meditative posture, adopt that. Most important thing is you want to feel stable. So if you are sitting in a chair, then let your feet be flat on the ground and not crossed. If you're sitting on a cushion or cross-legged, whatever way is comfortable for you, that you feel stable, that you feel like you are balanced, you're grounded. You want your back to be nice and straight, your chest to be open. Let your head rest on the top of your spine, following the natural curve, not tucked in too deep, not lifted up too high. Let your hands either rest in the meditative mudra, right hand on top of left, with thumbs just barely touching, resting at the level of your navel, or you can just let them rest on your lap, on your knees, your thighs, wherever they naturally fall. Let your jaw be nice and loose. Now, again, you're going to be reciting, so you want to not have any tension in your jaw. And ideally, you should have your eyes open for this whole practice. You'll need them open to recite the mantra if you don't have it memorized, but ideally it should be open for the entire practice as best you can. And in that case, you want your gaze to just follow the end of your nose to a space in front of you. It's not focused, but your eyes are open. They're not closing out the world. And so just take a minute to allow your awareness to focus on your breathing, to calm your mind, to prepare for the practice. Now on your right side, visualize your father. On the left side, visualize your mother. In front of you, visualize all those sentient beings who are your enemies, who might receive the label of enemy, who have agitated you or caused you harm. And all those sentient beings you might consider your friends, visualize them behind you. And then around them are all other sentient beings towards whom you might have the label of stranger. So in this way, try to make an expansive visualization of all of the sentient beings that exist, against whom you've engaged negative actions, right? These are the basis upon which you need to generate a mind of regret. And now, in addition to the sentient beings in the space in front, you can visualize all of the Buddhas in the aspect of Buddha Shakyamuni. Visualize the Buddha Shakyamuni as representing all three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And so as you adopt this seat, you're surrounded by all sentient beings, as well as the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and these represent all of the objects against which you have engaged in negative action. And so first you develop a mind of refuge. I forever take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and in all three vehicles, in the dakinis of secret mantra yoga, in the heroes and heroines, in the empowering goddesses and the bodhisattvas, but most of all, I take refuge in my holy guru forever. I forever take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and in all three vehicles, in the dakinis of the secret mantra yoga, in the heroes and heroines, in the empowering goddesses and the bodhisattvas, but most of all, I take refuge in my holy guru forever. I forever take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and in all three vehicles, in the dakinis of secret mantra yoga, in the heroes and heroines, in the empowering goddesses and the bodhisattvas, but most of all, I take refuge in my holy guru forever. Now, just take a moment to really generate and meditate on the mind of refuge. And now generating a mind of regret. First, recall the meaning of negative karma, any action that has caused any harm or suffering to others, any action motivated by ignorance, attachment, or aversion. Almost every action I do 24 hours a day is motivated by worldly concern, by attachment to the comfort of this life. It is like this from birth to death in this life, and has been like that from beginning this rebirths. Nearly every action I've ever created has been non-virtuous, the cause of suffering. Not only that, but continuously I have also been breaking my pratimoksha, bodhisattva, and tantric vows. Worst of all, I have created the heaviest of negative karmas in relation to my virtuous friends, getting angry at them, generating wrong views, having non-devotional thoughts towards them, harming their holy body, disobeying their advice. Having these negative imprints on my mental continuum is unbearable, as if I've swallowed a lethal poison. I must practice the antidote right away and purify all this negative karma immediately without a second's delay. In this way, generate strong feelings of urgency and regret. Many people my age or younger have died. It is a miracle that I'm still alive and I have this incredible opportunity to purify my negative karma. Death is certain, but its time is most uncertain. If I were to die right now, I would definitely be born in the lower realms. Because I cannot practice Dharma there, I would remain there in the lower realms for countless eons. Therefore, how unbelievably fortunate I am to be able to purify this negative karma right now without even a second's delay by practicing this Vajrasattva meditation recitation. So in this way, contemplate impermanence and death for a moment. And allow that to add urgency to your practice. Now, generating a mind of bodhicitta. I am not practicing this Vajrasattva purification for myself alone. The purpose of this life is to release all hell beings, all pretas, all animals, all humans, all asuras, all suras, and all intermediate state beings from their suffering and its causes, to lead them to unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment. And in order to do this, I must first reach enlightenment myself. Therefore, I must purify all my negative actions. I must purify all my negative karma immediately by practicing this Vajrasattva meditation recitation. In this way, meditate on the mind of bodhicitta. Now we begin the visualization. So above the crown of my head, seated upon a lotus and a moon seat, are Vajrasattva, father and mother. Their bodies are white. Each has one face and two arms. He holds a dorje and a bell. She holds a curved knife and a skull cup. They are embracing each other. The father is adorned with the 6 mudras, the mother with 5. He sits in the Vajra posture. She sits in the lotus posture. Vajrasattva is my root guru, the holy mind of all the Buddhas, the Dharmakaya, who, out of his unbearable compassion, which embraces me and all their sentient beings, appears in this form to purify me and all others. So in this way, you visualize that the Vajrasattva above you is your root guru, taking that aspect. On a moon disk at Vajrasattva's heart stands the syllable Hum, encircled by a garland of the 100-syllable mantra. A powerful stream of white nectar flows from the Hum and the mantra garland, and I am cleansed of all sickness, spirit harm, negative karma, and obscurations. So now we'll recite the mantra. You don't have to worry about counting. I'll do the counting for us. Okay. So the first 7 recitations engage in the downward purification, right? So this white nectar fills you from the top of your head downward, and the black smoke or black tarry liquid exits from the bottom. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Dero Mebhava Sudosho Mebhava Suposho Mebhava Anurakta Mebhava Sarva Siddhi Meprayasha Sarva Karma Suchame Chidam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Pai Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Teno Patishta Duro Mebhava Sudosho Mebhava Suposho Mebhava Anurakto Mebhava Sarva Siddhi Meprayasha Sarva Kama Suchame Chidam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Te Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Teno Patishta Dero Mebhava Sudosho Mebhava Suposho Mebhava Anurakto Mebhava Sarva Siddhi Meprayasha Sarva Karma Suchame Chidam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Te Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Teno Baptista Duro Mebhava Sudosho Mebhava Suposho Mebhava Anurakto Mebhava Sarva Siddhi Meprayasha Sarva Karma Suchame Chidam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Teno Padishta Dero Mebhava Sutosho Mebhava Suposho Mebhava Anurakto Mebhava Sarva Siddhi Meprayasha Sarva Karma Suchame Chidam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Te Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Teno Patishta Duro Mebhava Sudosho Mebhava Suposho Mebhava Anurakto Mebhava Sarva Siddhi Meprayasha Sarva Karma Suchame Chidam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Dura Mebhava Sudosho Mebhava Suposho Mebhava Anurakta Mebhava Sarva Siddhi Meprayasha Sarva Karma Suchame Chidam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Pe. Now for the next 7. Visualize the upward cleansing, purification. So the white light fills you from the bottom up, and the brown or black smoke or tar exits from the top and dissipates. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Duro Me Bhava Sudosho Me Bhava Suposho Me Bhava Anuraktu Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasha Sarva Kama Sucha Me Chiram Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vaja Mame Muncha Vaja Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Tada Me Bhava Sudosho Me Bhava Suposho Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasha Sarva Kama Sucha Me Shidam Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Duro Me Bhava Sudosho Me Bhava Suposho Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasha Sarva Kama Sucha Me Shidam Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Mahasamaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Duro Me Bhava Sudosho Me Bhava Suposho Me Bhava Anurakta Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasha Sarva Kama Sucha Me Shidam Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Duro Me Bhava Sudosho Me Bhava Suposho Me Bhava Anurakta Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasha Sarva Karma Sutra Me Shidam Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Duro Me Bhava Sudosho Me Bhava Suposho Me Bhava Anurakta Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasha Sarva Karma Sutra Me Shidam Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sarva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Duro Me Bhava Sudosho Me Bhava Suposho Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasha Sarva Karma Sutra Me Shidam Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Pe. And now as you recite the last seven, do the instantaneous purification visualization, where all of your negative actions are visualized as a black cloud at your center. And as the white nectar light comes from Vajrasattva above, it's like turning on a light switch. It's instantaneously vaporized and you're filled with bright white light that radiates from all of your pores. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Dura Me Bhava Sudosho Me Bhava Suposho Me Bhava Anurakta Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasha Sarva Kama Sutra Me Shidam Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Dura Me Bhava Sudosho Me Bhava Suposho Me Bhava Anurakta Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasha Sarva Kama Sutra Me Shidam Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Dura Me Bhava Sudosho Me Bhava Suposho Me Bhava Anurakta Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasha Sarva Kama Sutra Me Shidam Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Dura Me Bhava Sudosho Me Bhava Suposho Me Bhava Anurakta Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasha Sarva Kama Sutra Me Shidam Shriyam Kuru Hum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Muncha Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tena Patishta Dura Me Bhava Sudosho Me Bhava Suposho Me Bhava Anurakta Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasha Sarva Kama Sutra Me Shidam Shriyam Kuru kuru hum ha 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 ho Bhagavan Savatata Kata Vaja Mama Muta Vaja Vaja Maha Samaya Sava Ahum Pe Hom Vaja Sava Samaya Manupalaya Vaja Savatena Bachita Deramebava Surosho Mebava Supashyo Mebava Anurakta Mebava Savasiti Meprayata Savakama Suchame Shiram Shiam Kuru hum ha 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 ho Bhagavan Savatata Kata Vaja Mama Muta Vaja Bava Maha Samaya Sava Ahum Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Teno Patishta Durda Mebhava Surosho Mebhava Suposho Mebhava Anurakta Mebhava Sarva Siddhi Meprayata Sarva Kama Suchame Chidam Shriyam Kuruhum Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Savatata Gata Vajra Mame Mucha Vajra Bhava Maha Samay Yasattva Ahum Te. From the crown of my head, Guru Vajrasattva says, child of the race, your negativities, your obscurations, and broken and damaged pledges have all been completely purified. Generate strong faith that all of your negative actions have been completely purified, just as Guru Vajrasattva has declared. Now generating the mind of restraint. Before Guru Vajrasattva, I vow never again to commit those negative actions from which I can easily abstain, and not to commit for one day, for an hour, for at least a few moments, those negative actions from which I find it difficult to abstain. So generate the small, strong mind of restraint. Now Guru Vajrasattva is extremely pleased with your pledge. Vajrasattva, father and mother, melt into a ball of pure light. The pure light dissolves into you. Your body, speech, and mind become inseparable from the mind of your Guru, which is inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of Guru Vajrasattva. Okay. You bring your awareness back to the room. Now, generally, that practice you would conclude with meditating on emptiness for a short time and then doing a dedication. But we won't do the meditation on emptiness now, and we'll do a dedication at the end of our time today, so we can save that for the end. But you want to include in your practice that dedication, right? To make your whatever practice you do complete by having virtue in the beginning, middle, and end. So that's the practice. You saw I sped up my recitation as we went along. And as you do it more and more, it becomes much easier. You know, Lama Yeshe, in the 1970s, when all these Westerners first started meeting with Lama Yeshe and going to Kopan, he would have them all go do 3-month retreats on Vajrasattva. And he just had this belief that we have a lot to purify and we need to kind of get our shit together before we really start practicing. And they said it was incredibly beneficial. So I think it's important, right? And all of our teachers recommend that we do some sort of purification practice every day as best we can, you know? And, you know, I've often advised doing meditation in the evening anyway, to take a kind of an inventory of our actions throughout the day. How many of our actions today were actually Dharma actions and how many were worldly actions? You know, how many times did I let my emotions get the better of me? How many times did I notice my delusions or afflicted minds and control them before I acted out of them, you know? So I encourage that kind of reflective meditation anyway. And this is a good way to end your day, is to add this purification on top once you've done that. You can also recite this meditation, this mantra, you can just recite it all the time. One of the examples they gave is like, you know, if you take a piece of iron and continually rub a magnet on it, that iron will become magnetized. So if you just recite this mantra continuously all the time as you're walking around, you just have your mala going, reciting it, even if you don't have a strong visualization, right? As long as you have some motivation and intention in reciting it, it becomes second nature to you and it makes it easier to purify, right? Because you're constantly engaging in the act of purifying, right? Or you can do. So you don't only have to do it at the end of the day. And you know what? If reciting 21 times is too much, like if you don't have time to do that, especially in the beginning, when it's going to take you longer to recite that mantra before it becomes comfortable, then recite it once, recite it 7 times, recite it 10 times, however many times you can, right? If you can recite it 21 times, that's what's advised, but you do the best you can do. You know what I mean? We recognize that we have limits, so we do the best we can do. So the most important part of that, though, again, generating a strong mind of regret is really critical. And then you have to understand the law of cause and effect for that regret to be meaningful, because you don't just regret the actions in this life, but the actions of all of your previous lives as well. So I think with that, let's say, are there any questions about anything to do with karma
or with purification practice. I know that is a lot, and I've already gone over our time, but you know, again, doing the best we can do. I will say, for those who are interested, the prayer for the Confession Buddhas, I think it's also in this book, in the Gold Book. If not, it's very easy to get that online as well, you know. So that if you prefer to do the prostrations to the to the 35 Buddhas, that practice is also available. So those are the two most common. So again, ideally, you would be doing physical prostrations, but then if you're not able to, you do mental prostrations to the best of your ability, you know? So the ideal way would be doing like full body prostrations, right? And if you aren't able to do that, then you would do mental prostrations. And for that, there are different ways to do that one as well. If you want to do, again, you want to do 7 recitations or 21 or 35 or 7 or 21 recitations, one way to do it is, so there are 35 Buddhas plus the 7 medicine Buddhas are added. You would just recite the first Buddha's name 7 times as you do recitations. And then you do 7 for the next, then 7 for the next. And that way you can really focus on your visualization of that Buddha as you do the recitation. Or you could do the whole thing once and then repeat the whole thing again, whichever one is easier for you. So there's different ways to do that practice as well. You know, that practice. So, you know, there we have what are called preliminary practices that are often encouraged. So in the Gelug tradition, we have 9 different preliminaries, including doing 100,000 prostrations, making 100,000 water bowl offerings, making 100,000 tsatsa offerings, doing all these things, right? There's 9 different sets. They're supposed to do 100,000 of each. They're considered preliminary practices. But if you are fortunate, sometimes your guru can give you specific advice. And so I, many years ago, received specific advice from Lama Zopa about what I needed to do for my own Nundro. And that kind of advice generally is private, right? You don't need to share it. But I will say, for me, for prostrations, so in that, we are always advised, at least by Lama Zopa, to do the prostrations using the 35 Buddhas, because you might as well. If you're going to be doing prostrations anyway, you might as well be doing it to the confessional Buddhas, because that's more powerful. And he said that, you know, due to whatever karma I've created, I don't have to do 100,000. I have to do 350,000. So apparently that karma I've created is a little heavier, so it takes a little more work to burn it off. So, you know, but when you're doing prostrations, that visualization is really powerful.
300,000
prostrations.
So you do.
I haven't completed them yet, no, but I should. I've been advised to. Really, you should do it all at once. It's much easier. So you spend a couple months. Many people, that's why if you go to Bodh Gaya, you see them with prostrations outside and they just spend hours prostrated. That's what they're doing, most of them. Yeah.
Then they take breaks too.
Yeah, of course. You have to do your own pace. You have to do it whatever way is best for you. You know, anyway, there's different ways to do, you know, but if you're doing a committed practice, it's easier to do it all at once. If I just do like my whatever 10 a day or something, that's going to take a long time to get to 350,000, right? Even to 100,000, it's going to take a long time. But so when you're doing prostrations, it's good to include any visualization like this. Okay, so
sutra reading and 35 prostrations.
Different names for the same sutra. Different names for the same sutra.
Then if one is doing prostration practice by saying Buddha name, 35 Buddha names while prostrating, that's good enough. No need to.
Well, so the names of the 35 Buddhas and the recitation of the names comes as part of the 3 Heap Sutra. They're included in it. And the only thing added is there's a little bit in the beginning that's added. That's like praising the Buddha. And then at the end, there's a general confession prayer. There's 2 confession prayers that come at the end. So, and those literally only take a few minutes to recite. So in general, if you're doing the 35 prostrations of 35 Buddhas, you start by making the opening praises. Then you do all the prostrations, however many you're going to do. And then you recite the 2 confessions at the end. And that just includes all 4 opponent powers in that prayer. But so if you look at the prayer for the practice of 35 confession Buddhas or the sutra of the 3 heaps are the same thing. There's different names for the same thing. And those 3 heaps are representing, generally it said the heap of prostrating, the heap of confessing, and the heap of rejoicing. Though some teachers give a little different commentary, but that's the main point. But it's the same thing. So if you're going to do the prostrations anyway, you might as well recite the rest of the confession at that point. Yeah.
Now, these 2 practices, which are specific and others are pretty generic, that is reciting Vajrasattva and prostrations with 35 verses are specific practices. Out of these 2, which one is more powerful?
The regret's more powerful. That's what has to happen, right? So with these practices, and with any of your practices in general, you know, different people have different tendencies. So for instance, the reason Lama Zopa told me I have to do 350,000 prostrations instead of 100,000 is because he, in his, you know, all-knowing mind, he recognized that I had a proclivity that would be more beneficial for me, right? So for you meaning in general, it's worthwhile trying both of these practices and seeing if one of them really resonates with you, then you should do that one more, right? If there's one of them that feels easier for you to do, that both, whether physically or mentally or emotionally, you feel more connected to, then you can do that one. There's no like scale that says this is more powerful than that one. It's which one resonates with you more that you can do more wholeheartedly. So if you try to do this Vajrasattva meditation and it's like really hard and it doesn't work for you and you can't concentrate and it feels like you're just imagining things and it's fairy tale land, that's not very useful. But if you do the 35, the concentration of 35 and that feels useful, then do that one. You know what I mean? So you see which one makes the most sense for you. You know, you might be given specific advice from a teacher and that may go against your gut instinct sometimes. In that case, you follow the advice of your teacher, right? Because our gut instincts often are shaped by samsara, you know, or by our laziness, or at least mine are. So be aware of that. But otherwise, it's which one you can do more wholeheartedly. That's what's most important. Anything else about purification, but also about karma in general?
So can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
So there are four cases while reading Dharma, which comes in with karma and with so. One is the great Tilopa and the great Naropa's Guru and Shishya relationship, where great Tilopa tells Naropa to do things like temple and go in the
Yeah.
And after that, every time he would ask, "How are you feeling?" Then the Naropa will say, "I'm almost as good as dead."
Yeah.
And then Tilopa will snap and he will get up.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one. There is so in this, is it going against the karmic way because?
Okay, so the two examples, these are often taught when we talk about guru devotion. So you're talking about the relation between Tilopa and Naropa, and also you're probably next is going to be Marpa and Milarepa, right? Is the next one that's often taught, where the master has their student do outrageous things that cause them bodily harm, for the purpose of purifying their negative karma. So what we understand from those teachings is, first off, His Holiness has openly said that in the 21st century, it is inappropriate for anyone to be behaving in that such a way. So the kind of wild actions of Tilopa or of Milarepa, of Marpa, aren't appropriate for the 21st century life because it goes so contradictory to everyday life that it would cause more of a obstacle than be part of the practice. So first off, if your guru is telling you to, you know, go steal brides from the bridal train, you probably shouldn't listen to them. First off, but the purpose of those teachings and the reason both Tilopa and Marpa did that is because through their meditative insight, they realized that that was a fast track way to purify negative karma they'd created by, first off, they would be wholeheartedly putting their bodies and minds in danger by following the guru's advice. So it would be such a strong act of guru devotion that they'd be willing to put their bodies in harm's way. And so their physical suffering, along with their guru devotion, was able to purify heavy lifetimes of negative karma. But that's because it was the guru had advised them to do it, and they did it wholeheartedly without any doubts. You know, just harming your body like that isn't going to do it. It's relationship to the guru.
My question is more related to the action of Tilopa.
Okay. So he created negative karma.
No,
Did he?
So no. Okay. He does this, and Naropa is ready for the next tough action. Does he not go against the law of cause and effect for that purpose? He resuscitates Naropa.
Oh no! So I mean, in the story, the way we understand it is Tilopa had, you know, since due to his meditation on emptiness, his direct realization into the insight, into the nature of reality, he could control the elements in Naropa's body, so he could basically heal him, right? So it went against, I guess you could say, like normal worldly cause and effect, where Naropa would engage in this action like jumping off of a tall building and breaking all the bones in his body, but then Tilopa would just be able to heal him because he had magical abilities due to his level of realization. And so if you meet a teacher who has magical abilities, then sure, you can do what they say like that. But it's rare these days. So it has to do with his level. I mean, what we call magic these days, in the Buddhist tradition, both in Indian and Tibetan tradition, there are the ability to achieve what we call siddhis, right? Like different magical abilities due to your meditative realization, right? Such as healing, such as flying, such as traveling long distances in a single step, such as invisibility. These are all things you can accomplish, but all of them are like party tricks, right? That's the way they're taught to us is yes, you can accomplish these things by developing strong meditative insight, but they're useless. They don't do much except to engender faith in others. If you can use them for that end, they're useful. Otherwise, you should be working on Buddhahood. Those are just worldly little things. They don't matter that much. But so due to his meditative realization, the tradition says that Tilopa had certain cities, and one of those was being able to heal Naropa. Take it as you will.
The other one was related with Arya Nagarjuna,
Okay.
where that king's son goes to him and asks him, "How can I kill you?" And Nagarjuna is already a great bodhisattva, third ground, I guess. So and he says, "No, you can't kill me with a sword because I have already purified all those. You can kill me with such and such." Now, my question is, why could he not have purified that karma as well?
So the story of Nagarjuna that he's referencing is that Nagarjuna had purified all of his native karma except for one specific native karma that had to do with like beheading someone, right? And so he was able to be killed when someone like used a blade of grass to cut off his head because he had purified all these other negative karmas and not that one. Why did he not purify that one? Because he forgot? I don't know. There's no good reason. I don't know, to be honest. That's part of where you find the balance of understanding legend and understanding the meaning of it and being able to accept something as true in a mythic sense and maybe not true in a historic sense. Because we also say that Nagarjuna lived like 900 years, right? So.
Same with Mahamudra. In his last, I mean, he was so powerful. In the rest of his life, he's really almighty.
Yeah.
But he was an arhat.
Yeah. So when you're an arhat, right, that means if you've achieved the state of being an arhat, you've purified all afflicted minds, right? And so, and you had direct realization into the state, into the meaning of reality, into emptiness. And so when you have that, you have much more control of your physical body because you no longer are burdened by samsara because you're liberated from samsara.
So is it that the definitive karma which was there in his life, which we call projective karma, it was so strong that he had to experience it by end of his life with Kalyana, and he had to die by beating by sticks and all.
Generally, that's what we say. Yeah. Again, many of these are exemplary, like examples. It's hard to take all of them to understand them one to one because we look at these stories and say, what is it teaching us about the power of karma in this regard, or about whatever the topic is. There are many examples that are hard, that are kind of beyond belief, are somewhat fantastical. And for 21st century audiences, what I find important is whenever I read any of the sutras or any of the legends or the stories, the ones that are fantastical and are hard to believe at face value, then I try to adopt an agnostic attitude toward them and saying, this is hard for me to believe, but there's a meaning in this. There's a reason this was taught, and there's a point to this that can be true in a sense that is more important than the historical accuracy of it. And so I'm willing to find that truth and adopt that and believe in that. And then if belief in the historical accuracy comes and that's useful, I keep that. Otherwise, I have to find that balance, which is a hard thing, but it's kind of what, as 21st century practitioners who have access to science, have access to types of worldly knowledge that beforehand never existed, right? Or to the access never existed for any individual the way we have. You have to find that balance of both of them, Yes. That's my fault, not yours. So go ahead.
Being sadhana like this, what I've noticed is there are a lot of beginners' enthusiasm when you start out, and I've noticed this with both Varsaka and other daily sadhanas. You hit a point at the 20-30 day mark, whatever it is, and you're running out of motivation. And I wanted to ask, in your experience, how do you revive that when the world is rushing in? How do you revive that motivation?
That's a great question. So how do you maintain an interest in your practice, basically, and not get burned out too quickly because you burned really bright at the beginning. So one, I like to try to set a realistic expectation, right? So from the beginning, and understand that I'm not going to be able to recite 100 recitations of this every night. I know that right now. And so I start with 10. And you know what I mean? Like this. So you start small, and the same with any meditation practice. If you want to develop a daily meditation practice, just mindfulness meditation, you don't want to start by doing an hour a day, even if you feel like you can, because you're going to get burned out really quickly. But you start by doing 10 minutes a day. And then we've done that for a few months and you feel comfortable with it, then you increase to 15, 20 minutes like this, right? So in the same with these practices, you do a shortened version of them, maybe in the beginning, and you don't commit too much time to them, at least till you develop the habit, right? Because you want to develop the habit that engaging in this practice brings you joy, right? Part of engaging in specific meditation practices is that they should never feel like work. They should feel like joy. And so if they start feeling like work, if you've lost like the luster for them, then what you want to do is when you become aware of that, you meditate on that very thing. You say, what is it about this that is no longer working for me? And what is going on in my life? It might be that you have too many projects at work, so you don't have as much time anymore, right? And so you're crowded with things that you can't avoid. And so if there are things happening in your life that you can't avoid, then you say, okay, there are so many overwhelming things. How can I make my practice more condensed so I can still do it with the same type of energy and not be overwhelmed by it and not be bored by it and still give space for these other things? Or you look at the things that are filling your life and say, maybe these are things I don't need to be doing. Maybe that extra hour of Netflix every day is something I don't need to be doing, but I've just gotten into a habit of it. And so then you say, what are my priorities? Have I reprioritized worldly things and self-cherishing and letting this become not as important, right? And so you actually look at that mind that says, I'm bored with my practice. My practice isn't sparking joy, as I say. And you say, why? What is it about it, right? And you're going to find different answers and different options. So I can't give you like one perfect thing. But the important thing is you always want to leave a practice feeling like you should practice a little longer or feeling like you want to practice a little longer, right? So if at the end of your meditation, you're like, oh God, thank God, right? Then you want to readjust a little bit because you're not going to be able to keep it up, right? So you always want to leave yourself wanting to do a little more. And then as you do more and more, you create a habit. And so as you create the habit, then the way you can sustain it is you can add into your practice looking at the benefits you've experienced, right? So when you've been meditating for a month, you just say, take a moment to say, like, what has changed now in my everyday life just from doing mindfulness meditation every day? Has this had any sort of worldly effect? Even a small effect? Is it easier for me to have a calm mind? Do I not react as instinctively to outside pressures? Am I able to focus on things more easily? So just take stock and say, have I achieved anything useful, even just a calmer mind? And it may not be, actually most of the time, it's not going to be anything extraordinary, right? Because it's a very gradual process, but you're able to see your own successes and then you rejoice in those success. And you say, I'm doing the work, right? And it's not going to happen overnight, but when you see success, you rejoice in that, right? Because then that encourages more success and it gives more, it keeps the fire burning a little brighter. But really it's just being compassionate to yourself, recognizing that sometimes it's okay to do a condensed version of a practice if you need to do that. As long as you can do something with your whole heart and wholeheartedly, do whatever you can to keep the interest there. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is about karma.
Good.
The Tibetan resistance force, in which so many people died and it was held by the CIA and all that. So that had its blessings, like His Holiness gave them, it's there in the biography of his written by his brother. His Holiness's brother wrote the autobiography, and where he mentions that His Holiness blessed them and, I suppose wanted them to succeed. Now, how?
I think that His Holiness is able to give them his blessings without condoning their actions necessarily. And recognizing that if they were engaging in harmful or violent actions, he wasn't condoning that or encouraging it, but he also recognized they were going to be engaging in those actions with or without his blessing. So by giving them a blessing, he wasn't saying that what you're doing is free from negative karma. He was saying that I hope that you're able to succeed in such a way that is able to be of as little devastation as possible, right? So at least he was able to buffer their spirit, but he wasn't encouraging them to engage in harmful action. He was trying to.
But he knew what they were going to do.
Yeah, he was.
And I suppose, given that he was there, the kind of devotion everyone has, the Tibetans have. If he had told them, "I don't want you to fight for, I don't want this resistance force." I mean, sorry if this is. I hope it's not blasphemous.
No, it's not blasphemous. My impression
they
is.
Might have said, "Fine, we'll give it up," but he didn't act. That's not the case, but people died. I mean,
no, I mean,
the young.
in any case, there was a whole secret thing, right? I think he knew that they weren't going to follow that advice. In the same way with all of the recent Tibetans who've been self-immolating in the last 10 years, right? Over 180 Tibetans have self-immolated, right? And taken their own lives. And he often is asked about it. And he walks this fine line by saying he has nothing but deep compassion for the people that took their own lives and for their families and for the suffering they experience. And he has a lot of respect for their commitment, but he walks the line without then saying he encourages that behavior. So he has to try to find that balance, right? And as both a public figure and as a teacher, and he has to do that. So I think in this case that you're mentioning, the resistance forces, he knew that people were not going to, they were going to do it anyway. Even now, there are young Tibetans who either grew up in exile or came into exile who say they worship Dalai Lama as a Buddha, but they also say he's wrong and we need to actively fight against the Chinese government, right? And so he knew that if he said, don't do this, and they do it anyway, it would be even worse. So he's always trying to find whatever he can do that is the least harmful option, right? So it's kind of like a harm reduction model that he wanted to make it as least devastating as possible. That's what I have to believe. I don't, I wasn't in his mind, but I also have faith that the Dalai Lama would never encourage people to engage in non-virtuous actions. So he's looking at the situation and saying, this is not an ideal situation. So what can I do that will be the least harmful? What can I do that will be the best possible outcome and create the least harm for others, And so I think that's what often we find ourselves in these situations, right? Like we often find ourselves in situations where we have to do like for instance, if your house is infested with termites, you have to do something about that. Especially if you like live in a cave by yourself, then maybe you can deal with it. But if you're living in a community, you can't let that happen. You have to do something. So all of a sudden, you're responsible for killing all those insects. Even if you obviously order an exterminator or put down poison, that's still your karma. But you can't not do it because by living in a society, you've agreed to this social commitment where you're part of it. So what is the least harmful thing you can do? And there's often no good action. There's no good answer. So there's only the least bad answer. So we face similar situations all the time, not on the same level as what you're referencing, but that's something that we see in our life all the time, that you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And you say, neither of these are good. How can I cause the least harm? And then do something about it as best I can. Okay. So I apologize for going so late, friends. Yeah, I did not plan well. So I'm sorry. If you have more questions, you can always ask questions at any of our teachings. We have so this is our last class on karma. We have 1 week off next week. We come back the week after. I think that week after, actually on Saturday, will be Lama Thubten Yeshe puja, because it's traditionally you're supposed to offer tsok on the 10th and the 25th of Tibetan month, but it's very rare that we have classes on those days. But it happens to be on that Saturday. So I think there's gonna be a puja that day instead of a class. But then classes will resume the week after that. And that'll all be on the calendar if it isn't already. But so if you have a question about karma, you can just ask it there. That's fine. We'll answer. Whoever's here, that's fine. Or if you really have a strong question, you can get my email address and you can contact me that way, and I'll be happy to answer. But I'm sorry I kept us this late. So let's take this opportunity to close. Let's take this opportunity to recognize that through our review of karma over the last 4 weeks, and then especially all of our actions today, studying karma and its results, understanding why the study of karma is beneficial and useful for our practice. Through this today and then through our practice of Vajrasattva, we have created some positive merit. And instead of keeping that merit for ourselves, we will dedicate that to all sentient beings. We dedicate that merit to the perfect, complete enlightenment of all sentient beings, that they may be free from all suffering. We dedicate it so that we might quickly become Buddhas, so that we might have the ability to liberate all sentient beings from suffering. Instead of keeping that merit for ourselves, we wish it could be ripened on other sentient beings. And so instead of the normal recitation, I'm going to recite I'm first going to recite the dedication that's part of this Vajrasattva meditation composed by Lama Thubten Yeshe, which is just a little more elaborate. But then we will recite the dedication prayers on page 36 after I recite this. And so on page 36, we'll recite the first 2 prayers as well as the short long life prayer for His Holiness. But so again, if you do a daily practice, whatever it may be, you should always start with motivation and then your practice and you end with dedication. So if you do this Vajrasattva meditation, it has a dedication at the end that you would do. And that's what I'll recite for us now. Due to all these merits of the 3 times collected by all Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and myself, and all other sentient beings, which appear to be real from their own side, or which are empty, may I, who appears to be real but is empty, achieve Guru Vajrasattva's enlightenment, which appears to be real but is empty, and lead all sentient beings who appear to be real but are totally empty to that enlightenment, which appears to be real but is empty, by myself alone, who appears to be real but is also totally empty, non-existent from my own side. May the precious bodhicitta, the source of all happiness and success for myself and other sentient beings, be generated within my own mind and in the minds of all sentient beings without even a second's delay. May that which has been generated be increased. May I and all other sentient beings have Lama Tsongkhapa as our direct guru in all of our lifetimes, never be separated for even a second from the pure path that is greatly praised by the conqueror Buddhas, and actualize the complete path, 3 principal paths, and the 2 stages of highest yoga tantra, the root of which is guru devotion, within our minds as quickly as possible. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra realize things exactly as they are, I dedicate all these virtues in the best way that I may follow after them. Whatever dedication of the 3 times victorious ones, gone to bliss, have admired as best, in the same way I also perfectly dedicate all these roots of virtue so that I might perform good works. So then on page 36. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha, lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme Jula Bodhicitta that has not arisen, arise and grow. May that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Chanchu sem chorim boche ma ke panam ke gyushi ke wanya pa me pa yang gone gondu ke wa yosho. Land is circled by snow mountains. You are the source of all happiness and good, all powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara ends. Thank you so much. And speaking of a long life prayer for His Holiness, the week we come back will be the 5th and the 6th. That's the weekend. And the 6th on Sunday is Dalai Lama's 90th birthday. So there'll be a class that day, but it'll also be some sort of celebration of the 90th birthday of the Dalai Lama. I don't know if we figured out what it's going to be yet. If so, I haven't been told, but there's going to be something. So the Saturday will be probably a Lama Chopatsok. Sunday will be some sort of teaching and something in recognition of Dalai Lama's 90th birthday. So just so you are aware of that happening.
So Holiness was born in 1935, right?
Correct. The 90th.
Completing the 90th year.
He'll be turning 90.
Oh.
That's like the year they gave him. The Tibetans calculate their age in a very strange way. So this is the age that's like on his passport. That's what we say. I don't know. You know,
So
who
he
knows?
might be older.
He could be. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the Tibetans, when they're born, they're 1, right? Because they consider from conception. So they're born, they're 1. And then this is traditionally, when they're born, they're considered 1. And then at Losar, whatever the next Losar is, they're considered 2. So everyone is considered to go up a year on the new year. So that's considered everyone's birthday is the new year. So if you say, how old are you? They're basing it on how many new years they've seen. But so their first new year, they turn 2. So if they're born the day before the new year, they could really be 2 days old, but they'd be considered 2 years old. So it's just strange. And then they came to India and they're like, on their form or their paperwork for what's your birthday? They just like made up a thing. There are so many monks whose birthday is January 1st because I'm like, I don't know, it's January 1st. So this is the day that we've decided that he's turning 90. That's kind of how it goes. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you spending time with me. I apologize for taking an extra half hour of your evening, but I enjoy spending time with you. So thank you.